Okay, so my name is Corey Smith. Welcome to Horse Racing Tell Me How. So for those that have been involved in the first two series, it's sort of evolved a long way through, and we started off with trying to learn how we might go and buy a horse and how you go about that to now moving on to tonight's episode, which we have racing royalty with us in Mike deKock. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you very much.
And Mathew deKock. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Corey.
And tonight's episode is based on international racing. So as you can see there on the screen, South Africa obviously is your background, but also winners in the UAE, Hong Kong, Singapore, USA, Australia, and the UK. And we'll just look there. 126 Group 1 wins. I had a look, but I did my own research there, Mike, and I looked through to see, which ones I could bring up. And to be honest, with 126, there's almost too many to go through. How do you even remember them? And do they ever become less special, or is everyone just as special as the past?
I think they're all special. Certainly the early ones abroad meant quite a hell of a lot as well. But they're always special. I think they're the majors. I think every trainer strives for Group 1 winners. You certainly do have your favorites when it comes to horses, for sure. But I think sometimes it can be overplayed, but it generally is the benchmark, I suppose, for everybody these days. That everyone talks about the majors when it comes to any sport.
Yeah, and I guess from a training perspective, you're very well known for travelling horses and having success. You're one of the pioneers almost in that regard. How did you first try your hand at that? What made that come about, and what made Mike deKock start travelling horses to other countries to take their prize money, so to speak?
Yeah, it's funny. It probably started very early in my career, in about 90, 91, somewhere around there. I caught a one-ticket pick six, and with a couple of my friends. So I decided to travel, and I went to France and I went to Newmarket, and I stood in the downs in Newmarket, and I thought, I'd actually like to be one day with a horse, and it always stuck in my mind. And then eventually I got a horse in '99 called Horse Chestnut, and the Oppenheimers owned him, who would be, they would be well known here, and they would have been game enough to travel horse. And he was just a superior athlete, and I just thought, I know we stuck down here in the bottom end of Africa. If Ernie Els only played golf here, he'd only be on the Sunshine Tour. No one know who he was, or there would be no majors for him. And I thought, I've got a horse here that is that good. He's that fast. If there's something up better than him, then let's see. Let's go. Let's go and test ourselves against the best in the world. And of course, he won in America, and then he was on his way to the Dubai World Cup. Funny enough, the same year as Dubai Millennium, and unfortunately, then injured himself in America. But that really got it going. Then I went to the World Cup a year later, and the opportunity came up in Dubai for stables. They built an international village. It was pre-carnival, and I went across with 5 horses. One of them being Ipitombi and Victory Moon, who then won on World Cup night. So that was a real that got the real taste for it, But it was just that burning desire to succeed, in a bigger stage, on a bigger stage.
Yeah, and I guess one of the great race mares of the modern era, Ouija board. Obviously, the dam of the Sire, Australia. In the end, you beat that mare. So, how was that feeling?
That was huge. We were pumped that day. That was in Hong Kong, but I can tell you now that was Washon Maui. All we get, the filly was fit and well, but he rode a race. I still think, if I look back on all the winners I've had in my life and Group 1 winners, that's got a rate amongst one of the top 3. It's just the most unbelievable ride. And the line came in time, but he rode fantastic race. But she was a very good filly. She also got beat short head in the Beverly D in America. She ran second in the Falmouth at Newmarket. So she was no slouch. Yeah. But I think the conditions and the ride, it all fell into place that day. That was a huge, huge, huge win.
And I guess with stables essentially all over the world, how do you keep control of all of them? Do you ever sleep?
No, I find time to sleep. Don't worry about that. You know, you've got to have good assistants. I've always had good assistants, and then Mathew joined me probably a good 10 or 11 years ago. Mathew, I can't remember, you're 18 or 19. And that sort of also made a big difference, but I've always surrounded myself with good people that I could trust. I don't just sit back and leave it to them. Whether it was in Dubai, I had a great team there in Trevor Brown and Stephen Gell, Mathew back here with other guys, John Butler and Nathan Kotson. So I've always had a big team and good guys.
Yep, and I've just launched a poll there. So for people that might be interested, throughout the webinar, we'll have polls pop up there for people to vote on. But Mike, if there was one race in the world that you haven't won yet, and I mean you've won a lot of them, which is it that you would, the one that's got away, or the one that maybe in the future you'd love to win?
Look, you always want to win the big ones. I would really, really have loved to have had a winner at Royal Ascot. We nearly did. Actually, with 200 to go, I almost got up and started walking, and then we got snared on the line. The World Cup as well. We had a photo finish in the World Cup, 10 minutes separated. I mean, it took about 10 minutes for the photo to be separated. But I just like the big meetings. I've been to the Melbourne Cup. I had a runner there at Rand Bush. But, I really like those big meetings. They what sort of fire you up. But the two that have got away in short hit scenarios are Royal Ascot, King Stan's winner, and obviously the World Cup. And an Arlington Million as well. We actually won it and it got taken away on objection.
I've got some giveaways for today. So while they're all answering the first poll, you'll notice that it says Griffith Racing there, but we know it's now Griffith deKock Racing, and Matt there down the bottom, 3 winners in the first week. How important, Mike, has Matt been to your stable success? Obviously you're speaking about the last 10 years, but in general, what has that done for the brand to have, 2 generations now having success, and now Matt going out on his own down here?
Look, it was very important when Matt came on board. He was very young, and I threw him in at the deep end at a very early age. But even still, if he was 18 or 19 years and he started with me, years old, he'd been in the game for that amount of time. He had always watched the game and interested in. Funny enough, he had a golf scholarship to play in America, and he was sort of between 6s and 7s. I think it was going to take another 6 months before he could go. And I just said to him one day, but what do you actually want? Because I realized if he was going to play golf for a living, it was going to cost me a lot of money.
He's obviously good at it, so I'll remember not to play golf with him.
Thank goodness he decided to come into racing, and I took him to Dubai for his first stint with me. And I said to him, spend your time in the feed room around the horses. You learn to feed horses. You understand how their stomachs behave and how they eat. You'll understand a lot of them. So he did his first year there with me, and then I sent him to the National Stud in England, where he worked with foals and mares and all that kind of thing under a mate of mine, Brian O'Rourke. And I thought that was a good point as well, to learn about horses from the day they are born till the day they are stallions. So, he's been groomed very early. And, Mathew is pretty good at getting on with the people, the communications, all that kind of thing. I'm hopeless at it. And, sometimes when you're young in your career, you're very aggressive. He did, as I said to him, I've had to fight for everything and fight for everything to keep it. He didn't have to do that. He can take it to the next level. So he's got the package in that he's the horseman and he's the communicator and the personality,
Yeah, and we've got a giveaway there. So I can see some questions coming through, and we'll do questions and answers as we get through. But we'll give away that prize pack on the left there to the best question. So if you guys keep an ear out when we give out the questions, if there's one that you think is a great question, then that will be the winner. But we'll focus now, Matt, on yourself. What a week you've had. 3 winners in your first week, and some, also you had Great run in the Derby by Token Spirit as well. So how are you finding it? Firstly, training here and helping Robbie, but now being a partner and training on your own, having that name in the book.
Yeah, Corey, it's been an awesome opportunity. It's quite daunting to see my name in a book and have it be in an Australian racing industry. But it's been an awesome opportunity for someone starting out to inherit a yard of 60 with Robbie, and in your first week have 3 winners and have a horse run in a Group 1 and run a cracker. That's something that you wouldn't expect. You know, if you were starting out our own yard, something like that could be 3 years away. So just to walk through the door and have runners in your name, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for me and something I'll always be grateful to Robbie for. But I think it's a great start for the partnership, and it's only a sign of better and, you know, good things to come in the future.
And a couple of questions on the screen there you've probably answered. So we know that you would have been into golf if it wasn't for training. But once you've got into it, you've come down here. Why Robbie Griffith? So I'm sure, you know, with the name of the stable over there, you could probably take your pick. But why Robbie? What drew you to that stable?
Well, there was a lot of fate involved in that. We did a tour of Australia last year in July, and we decided that Cranbourne was, in our minds, the best place to train a racehorse in Victoria. And so I wanted to get the lay of the land and learn how Cranbourne works and the Victorian racing works. And Neil Bainbridge, who's a fantastic person and really helped us out, said Robbie Griffiths was the best man to do it with at Cranbourne. And we approached Robbie, and he was, you know, always helpful and very kind. And he's had 100 winners a season for the past 10 years, barring last season when he had ill health. So it's really been, like I said, a fantastic opportunity for me to join Robbie. And since we joined him, it's just the synergy between us has really been great, and it just felt like it was always right, you know.
Yeah. And when did you know that you would become a trainer? So was there a point in time where you thought maybe you would do something different, or was it always going to be training for you?
I think the very first day that I decided after school that I'm going to work in the yard, the very first day I worked through those doors, the bug bit me, and there hasn't been a day where I've doubted the fact that this is what I want to do.
Yeah. And you've got obviously the experiences with your father, but what other mentors have you had that have really shaped your career? And I know you mentioned the National Stud in England in last week's webinar, and I guess that's one of them. But what experiences have shaped you to this point?
Yeah, the National Stud was a massive experience because it really honed my basic horsemanship skills. So handling stallions and mares and foals really taught me a lot about handling the horse itself, not just being a supervisor. So that really helped me with the horsemanship skills. And someone like Brian O'Rourke at the National Stud is a mentor to me, and he taught me how to be a leader as well. You know, I just watched him lead his stud farm and his crew. He was a fantastic leader and very hard on them. Obviously, my dad is a mentor to me. And then, like my dad said, he's always surrounded himself with great staff, and especially people like Trevor Brown and Stephen Gell, who are my dad's international assistants. I really felt like I learned a lot from them. That really grew me in a short space of time with them. And my mother as well. People often forget about my mother. She was a great horseman in her own right and a great person. She's given me a lot of advice on how to handle staff and situations like that. So she's obviously a big mentor to me as well.
Yeah. And I guess this is a question for both of you, but what do you love the most about horse racing? If there was one thing.
Well, maybe I'll answer first. I enjoy the satisfaction of getting a horse fit and seeing it successful on the race course. That adrenaline rush when a horse wins, and satisfying people like you can see in this picture on your screen on the left there. Those are my best friends leading in their horse. That's probably the best day in racing for me. So that's obviously what I love most, is having winners for people close to me.
Yeah. And Mike?
Yeah, I really enjoy nurturing young horses and seeing them going through and buying them at the sales. It gives me a great sense of satisfaction. The other thing is I love traveling the world and meeting good racing people. I'm fortunate in racing. It's taken me to most serious racing jurisdictions in the world, and I've met some wonderful people. And that is something that I really enjoy as well. I make no secret of the fact that I like a bit of a party and a couple of drinks with the boys afterwards. But there's that social aspect to it. But also the actually working with horses. I worked with horses for 2 years in the military, and that really sort of grew my love for them.
Yeah, and something in the very first webinar I ran, we had Simon Vivian from Inglis, and something he said that is stuck in my mind is that the best advice he could give any prospective owner is to invest in people first and foremost. And if you invest in the right people, you'll have a good experience. I've got a question here from Craig Appenethy, Matt. He's asking what your favourite race course is in Australia.
Yeah, well, I haven't managed to get to all of them just yet, but the other day going to Moonee Valley was a fantastic experience, and I was blown away. It's an awesome race course, and it's definitely a spectator's course. So probably that's my favorite at this stage.
Yeah, and Mike, how proud do you feel when you sit here talking on a webinar when we're speaking about Matt as a trainer in his own right, as opposed to one of your staff?
I think that's the best winner that I've ever trained, is the fact that he's making his own way in life. It means a hell of a lot to me, and I understand where Mathew's coming from, and that he wants to, to forge his own way personally. But, for him to do it in another country, it's not something we expected that quick. We took a very long-term view of going to Australia and how we were going to deal with it. I think COVID probably accelerated things. And the fact that we came across a gentleman in Robbie Griffiths, so and probably the decision to go to Cranbourne, having met Neil, I don't know, things just fall into place. I'm a fatalist, and it's fantastic, and we've got he's got a business plan, Mathew as well, and we hope that we can actually add to the Australian racing community.
Yeah, and I've been lucky enough over the past month to be involved with the stable doing a little bit of work, and the buzz and the excitement and the people there, it's definitely got the vibe of a stable that's going places, and then that's without the winners on the track. So global racing, it's cut off the ing there, but on the screen, but says global racing. So I guess the question here for both of you, Matt, in your travel, what are the different beliefs in each place? Like what stands out to you from a training aspect that's different in each of the jurisdictions?
Sure, that's a difficult question, Corey, because everywhere is so different. I mean, Australia, the whole market is geared towards young horses and fast horses, and then you get somewhere like the UK, which is all about winning a race like the Derby, and in America, it's all about winning at the Breeders' Cup and the Kentucky Derby, and they got completely different medication rules. So every place is unique, and that's just been the great opportunity that I've had to go and see every place and experience every place. And I still believe that South Africa is probably one of the most neutral in that we got a good mix of young horse racing, old horse racing, fair rules. So it's been a fantastic opportunity for me as a young person through my dad to go and see most of these places.
Yeah, I've got a question here. So it's an anonymous attendee, but Yulong Prince won the Group 1 on Saturday. Could you see, Mike? Could you see more South African horses coming to Australia? And then Ben McGrath asks, which ties in, when South Africa work out the expert sport protocols, will South African horses be better suited to Australian racing or better suited to the US? So sort of two questions in one, but I mean, it's all about exports.
Well, this has obviously been a bugbear of mine for a long time, because I've really felt that our horses are competitive, the better horses, let's be honest. Part of our game plan originally, Matt and I, when we looked at setting up there, was to export from South Africa. I mean, we've done a lot of importing from Australia at 12-1 against. If you think of the other way around, divided by 12-1, it actually becomes quite a value market. And if I look at a horse like Yulong Prince, who's been very competitive there in Group 1s for a number of races, if one looks at the international ratings, there certainly are horses here at the moment and current and horses that have been exported that are higher rated than him. I firmly believe that that those horses would be competitive over a mile or more in Australia. Your sprinters are super; they're very, very strong. But for us, our whole game plan, especially since I met Sheikh Mohammed bin Khalifa, was to bring the horses from Australia, prepare them here, and ship them to Dubai for the carnival. But if we can do the other way around now, prepare them in South Africa, and buy horses at that level, Group 1 level, ship them to the carnival, and then down to Australia for your lucrative stakes there. That for me is it's just a reverse of what we've been doing very successfully, and with a currency more in your favor, buying out of South Africa. I'm not saying that we're looking to flood the Australian market with South African horses, certainly not, because there's the one or two individuals that come out every year that would be good enough to compete in Australia. You do have, obviously a bigger population there, and therefore more chance of finding a good horse. But it's something that I think can be looked at. The protocols will change. I'm fairly confident of that, which will reduce the time between Australia and South Africa a lot. You still have to go via Europe, but we could then get a fit horse into Australia. And that is what I would like to do. Prep them here, use this as the nursery, and get them to Australia via the carnival in Dubai. Because I'm still a believer in the carnival. It's very lucrative. I don't think it's something owners can overlook. And it's easy to get to the carnival from Australia as well. But when we sort out our protocols, it'll be a massive game changer. In fact, if we don't, I think South African racing and breeding is in trouble.
Yeah, and you've got a two-pronged attack if you've got Matt sending them there and you sending them there from South Africa. But I guess you mentioned the famous Sheikh there. And we mentioned off air a little bit about ownership and how it differs. But what are the main differences in ownership you see in the different countries? You mentioned how strong it is here and how you walk down the street here and people know about horse racing. But if you could expand a little bit on the differences of ownership and how are there syndicates in those places?
South Africa hasn't really embraced syndicates to the extent that Australia has. It's something that we still really need to get our heads around and do more of. You're very good at it there. I think your owner there is probably more demanding of communication than they are here. We wouldn't communicate in the social media on the level that you guys do there, which is, in itself, it's a completely different department. Coming from a old school trainer like I am, it's something that I still battle to get my head around, whereas a youngster like Mathew sees it as easy. Exactly what you're doing now is not something that we'd be doing here. So that is one of the big differences. South Africa is also battling to grow its owner base. In fact, I think we're shrinking slightly. We've lost a lot of the old school owners, whereas you seem to have quite a young owner base there, and I think that has a lot to do with the occasion, the social media, your race club system there that really entertains. So that for me would be quite a big difference if one was comparing the two countries.
Yeah, and I've launched another poll up there, and the viewers are saying that they'd like to have a horse go to a race in Dubai or the UK. So we're all on the same page there. They're the most popular. Matt, you also were talking off air about education, and one of the reasons I started this webinar was to educate myself, and then it sort of grew from there. And the feedback I got early on was that people loved it because if they don't grow up in the horse racing industry, there isn't a lot of education available. Is that the same worldwide, or is that something that maybe other countries do better?
Yeah, it's pretty similar worldwide. You're right in saying, like, a person like me born into a racing family is at a great advantage because I can just learn from my mom and dad every day, whereas someone that's not born into a racing family, to be educated in racing is very difficult. There are a couple of courses, but they're very limited in their sizes. Like the one that I did, the National Stud, only accepts 24 people a year. The Darley Flying Start only accepts 12 people a year, and it's quite lucrative. So it is a challenge for a person outside of racing to be educated.
Yeah, and I have a lot of questions coming through. So what I might do is just skip over some of the questions there, and I might go to the viewer questions first to make sure that we get these ones out there. Chaz Preble says, Mike, you had great success in Hong Kong. How did you first get involved with going there?
I think Hong Kong are quite proactive when it comes to sourcing horses, because sometimes, well, I suppose today it's easier with social media as what it is. But in those days when I first started going there, I mean, you were aware of Hong Kong, and we had Alec Laird take a horse from South Africa, funny enough, and win the QE2 there. That was when we were exporting directly. But I think jurisdictions like Hong Kong are very good at sourcing good horses for their international meetings. And once you've had the experience of going there once, you definitely want to go there again. I think as an international racing jurisdiction, you're really made to feel welcome. And it's not an effort at all. But again, you've got to travel the right type of horse if you want to go anywhere in the world.
Yeah, and Matt, a question from Nigel Thompson. He says, Matt, is it going to be a long-term partnership with Robbie?
Yeah, that's the aim. We want to grow together and use each other to grow and be big and to be, like one of those big competitive partnerships that are so successful, Kieran Marr and David Eustace, Mick Price and Mick Kent. That's going to be our goal.
Yeah. And Mike, a question from Peter Stanley. Which is easier to train, a young filly or a young colt?
Colts have always got their challenges, I think. They're always 2 stone heavier. If I had my way, I'd gall them as they walked into the yard. But training these days for, training nice horses with pedigrees, sometimes you've got to be a bit more patient. So I'm going to lean towards a filly just because they generally seem to be more genuine and straightforward.
Yeah. Matt, do you prefer stayers or sprinters? And we will get to that for the next poll. So this question's a good one.
No, definitely stayers.
And I believe that there's a little bit of talk around the stable about you going across to try and find a good staying type at the Karaka Ready to Run sales. Is that correct?
Well, we'll definitely be looking. Hopefully we can find a good one.
So I've just launched a poll there. So for people that might be interested, we can get them to jump in at cost price basically and go there and source them a good one. I'm pretty confident you'll find a good one there. I know that there's been a bit of talk around, and that's sort of one of the aims. I know Jack in the office is quite excited about that. So we'll get back to the questions though. Mike, you had a great association with locals Kevin Shea and Waichong Mawing, is that right? Riding your horses over the years. Who rides for you now?
Now I've got a bunch of jockeys. I must be honest, the likes of Kevin Shea, Mawing, Dalpesh. We've got a good spread of really young jockeys. We've lost a lot of the older senior jockeys. With the greatest respect to them, Kevin Shea, Mawing, Dalpesh, the guys that rode for me recently, were awesome. The guys that ride for me now have got a long way to go to ever get to that level. And the thing I loved about them as well was their big match temperament. Those guys were cool, and that for me is such a big part. That that's the one department you don't want to worry about. That's not your department. And if you've got to start worrying about what the jock's going to do and how he's going to ride, and worry about training the horse, that's double stress. It's not stress I want.
Yeah,
they must deal with it. And those boys were that level. And then obviously in Dubai, a bloke like Christophe Soumillon, unbelievable jockey. He's a great mate of ours as well. Big match temperament too, huge. Johnny Murtaugh, another one. I've been privileged to have some really, really good jockeys ride for me in my time.
Yeah, I've got a question here for Matt from Bella Rice, asking what are some of the main changes, if any, in the training methods at the Griffith deKock stables based on you and your dad's experience? So I guess, you spoke last week about 2 heads are better than 1.
Are you saying what are the changes?
What are the main changes they'll make at the stable?
What are the changes that I've noticed?
The changes that you will bring. Or is it more about having 2 people?
Yeah, well, obviously the treadmill is one of our main skill sets. My dad's been lucky enough to work with some of the most highly respectable treadmill gurus of the world, and I think he's considered a guru of the treadmill. And he passed down those skills to me. And when I arrived, Robbie invested in another treadmill, so he now has 2 treadmills. So we have them going flat out in the morning. So that's one of the things that I definitely feel like I've been fortunate enough to help Robbie with. And then, yeah, training methods in Australia and South Africa are not too dissimilar. We train pretty similar, and maybe the main thing you guys do differently is you trial them a lot more. But yeah, things are pretty similar to back home.
Yep. And Mike, the deKock team is known for its progressive hoof care. But I guess what I'll get you to expand on, that's a question from Catherine Brueggemann. But what I'll get you to expand on is the horse welfare in South Africa. Does that differ very much to Australia? And I know you're quite progressive in that.
Are you talking general welfare or just hoof care, that type of thing?
Well, hoof care that you're well known for, I guess. So it would be great to have the advanced knowledge implemented in the new partnership. How can you see this giving your owners an edge?
Well, again, as you travel, you learn. One of my very close friends, a chap called Declan Cronin, he was very, very proactive when it came to hoof care. And, we started doing things differently, training them without shoes. Not all horses can deal with it, rehabilitating the structures in the feet. Because what you find as well these days, unfortunately, and, one does understand it, but breeders play a lot with the feet when it comes to trying to straighten legs out. So that when they get to the sales, they're walking with a straight foot and the foot's looking at you, but the one knee's looking at the North Pole, the other knee's looking at the South Pole, but the feet are straight. And a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of damage is done in the structures in the feet just by breeders. And I understand why, again, the commercial aspect of things, and that's why they play with them. But it's something we cottoned onto sort of many years ago, and that just let the feet go. Let them go where nature wanted them to go. Don't play with them. Keep them balanced, but get the structures, get a hoof healthy, get the structures right. And you can do that a lot with barefoot. That's for sure. You can, there's always been that saying, no foot, no horse. And, there's certain places you can train without shoes. I think Cranbourne is one. South Africa, certain places you can, but there's not many places in the world that you can train without shoes. It's certainly, in my opinion, an advantage. Not only a financial advantage, but if done properly, a massive advantage to the soundness and well-being of yours.
Yep. And one here for Matt from John Heimer. What's the prize money like in South Africa, but also in the other countries?
Yeah, South Africa is obviously nowhere near the level of Australia, which is obviously one of the main reasons for attracting us to Australia. Our expenses are a lot lower, but it's certainly not to the level of Australia. Yeah, and then around the world, I suppose when you're racing on big days, the prize money is always fantastic. I know that England and Ireland are struggling though with their general prize money, but places like America and Dubai and Hong Kong are never short on prize money.
Yeah, I've got a few more questions here. So for Mike, what's the actual process? So this is from Craig Abernethy again. What's the actual process of shipping horses around the world, and how expensive is that?
Currently, out of South Africa, we have to go via Mauritius, where we have to do, so we'll do 21 days isolation in South Africa. We'll do 90 days Mauritius, of which 45 will be under quarantine conditions, and then Mauritius to the EU. So it's quite a lot of flying, and it's quite time consuming. The disadvantage of Mauritius is the training. We're unable to do anything more than a trot or a hack. And the downtime can be good for some horses, but it can generally, you take in horses in the prime of their career, athletes, you're giving them downtime, they lose bone density, they lose a bit of muscle on you. So you open yourself up to injury. If we now get the protocols as they were before, when I first started shipping horses, which would then be a 40-day quarantine in South Africa, then straight into the EU. And the 40 days you'd be able to train fully as normal. So that is a massive difference. And hopefully we can get that done by March, April. Then South Africa certainly is a prospect, and is going to be a value market, for for overseas buyers. You know, if you came to South Africa and you spent $100,000 or $200,000, you are buying at the absolute top end of the market. Whereas in Australia, you're almost buying below the average.
Yeah.
So if you took a view on classic pedigrees, for instance, I mean, I wouldn't come here and try and compete with your sprinters at all. You'd be slightly ahead of the game, in my opinion. I think there's value to be had. You know, so the quarantine protocol, European protocol, if it does get reintroduced, will be a massive game changer for this country. And as I said before, it'll be a savior. If we don't get it, I fear the worst. I think we're desperate for that international income.
Yeah, and a question, I'll stick with you here, Mike. A question from Daniel Guthrie actually said, what up-and-coming sires and new sires excite you the most, both Australian and international? So I guess you could maybe mention some of the South African ones in that.
I'll tell you what, he hasn't had a runner yet, but Rafif is a Redout's choice, who I won a Group 1 over 5 furlongs with, as a young potential sire. Obviously, Silvano is a proven. Silvano and Give Me the Green Light in South Africa are proven. They get you sprinters, they get you milers, they get you classic horses. I find amazing is the amount of stallions you have in Australia that go to stud. It's actually almost confusing. And I suppose there's an advantage having seen them run and know the horses and having worked with them. But as I said, just on something that sort of relates to you, I'd be excited about a stallion called Rafif, you know, he's actually, funny enough, out of a South African mare who raced in England and then retired to stud in Australia, but it's by Redout's choice.
Well, interestingly enough, our poll has ended, and Matt, they want you to go after a Tavistock or a Savabeel. So, which probably will cost a little bit, I'd say. But there we go, and I'll get you those results afterwards. Some really good questions here, though, Matt. One for you. This is from William Cederino, and you must be very careful when answering this, but Springboks or Wallabies?
Oh, it's no race, Springboks.
and one for you, Mike, from Daniel Guthrie, which is just as tasty. If you had to choose just one, you train a winner at Royal Ascot, or you have Matt train the winner at for a Melbourne Cup. Which do you choose?
Matt train a winner at Melbourne Cup. It's no race.
And a final one. This is interesting with the rugby theme, because Danny Dagan is he's a fitness coach for the New Zealand national men's football team. So he actually has asked, do you see any benefit in training horses in altitude in South Africa?
Well, I do, funny enough. We train here at 6,000 feet. And I firmly believe we get a bit of a lift when we go to sea level. If one just looks at the hematocrit account of a horse at our level in Johannesburg and a horse at sea level, you've definitely got to believe that there is an edge to it. Plus, there's some really good evidence and studies on training horses, or almost sleeping them at altitude and training them at sea level, or vice versa. It's something I would love to get my teeth into sometime, but that's a very expensive exercise, and you'd need a sponsor there, and a treadmill within a controlled environment would probably be the right way to go. But yeah. Yes, I've seen the evidence. Yeah, training at 6,000 feet.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because obviously in other sports, athletes do similar, and it obviously has had some pretty good effect in that sense. So, yeah, it's something that probably hasn't been brought up before. But how many staff do you employ worldwide? Like, have you included all of them, or have you lost count?
No, roughly about 65 at the moment. You know, we sort of, Dubai as seasonal, and we come and go there, so it's not, you don't have a permanent staff. Yeah. And I ship the guys from here to Dubai. They come over, but roughly around 65 at the moment.
So one staff member for every 2 Group 1s. That's not bad going. And Matt, we spoke about the long-term vision, but do you see your dad moving down here with you eventually?
Oh, I think you better aim that question at him. I think it's a difficult question. I probably don't see him moving down here too soon. He loves his golf and his friends too much, but I know he'll be here visiting a lot. So, yeah.
And we will wrap it up fairly soon. So next week's webinar, we have a different racing family. So the Corstons family are on. So we have Leon, Troy, and Kevin on. So for anyone interested in tuning in, that's next week's Tell Me How webinar. I've got a couple more questions there, and we will give away the caps and the giveaway. So Patrick Sylvie, since Matt prefers training distance horses, have you changed any training methods of the stable stayers since the partnership formed, Matt?
Well, I think it's still too soon, Corey. Only just been in the partnership for 2 weeks. Me and Robbie, we worked together. We developed horses programs together, and I'm sure going forward we're going to find a perfect middle ground for the stayers that we hopefully will be buying.
Yeah, and I guess another question, and I mean, it's been probably overdone, people speaking about COVID, but you moved down here in March. How's your time in Australia been outside of horse racing? How have you found Australia, I guess, with the time you've been here? You've been in lockdown, basically.
Very difficult, Corey. We have actually battled a little bit. It hasn't been easy. We would have liked to have been able to get out and meet people and do things. But very fortunate that Monique, my partner, has been strong and by my side, and we've helped each other every day when we were a little bit down. And very fortunate that Robbie and Shirani have been great people to us and looked after us, and their staff have been great. So we're fortunate in that regard, but it hasn't been easy, and we're really grateful that we can actually do things now.
And what have you seen? Daniel Guthrie asked another good question here. What do you see the main differences in the way that yourself and Robbie approach training? Or I know actually you've said this before, that one of the reasons you were attracted to that partnership is that you do see things quite similarly.
I'll just say that again quick, because you just broke up a little bit.
So what are the main differences in the way that yourself and Robbie view training?
The main differences?
Yeah.
Sure. That's we've been lucky in that we see things pretty similarly. I've been learning from Robbie mostly at the moment, so it's difficult to put an answer to that question, and it's quite soon in the partnership. But I think on a whole, Australian training methods and South African training methods are pretty similar, so there's not too much to differ at this stage.
Yeah, and Paul Baker says, go hard squeeze in the Oaks. The new partnership has a Group 1 winner already waiting. So big, long, but still in it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'm very fortunate. This is my second Group 1 winner in 2 weeks of Group 1 runner in 2 weeks of training. Hopefully my first Group 1 winner.
Yeah. And Mike, I guess, how have you coped with missing Matt in your stable?
Yeah, with difficulty, I mean, Matt is also my best friend, so it's been tough. But we've got a good team. He left a good bunch of guys in place here, and yeah, we're coping. It's you miss him on big days. You have big winners. You'd love him to have been there, but look, it is what it is. We get by it. Thankfully, things like FaceTime and all that kind of thing help. To get over it. But I am doing this. I was doing it for Mathew, for him to take over too. But unfortunately, circumstances changed, and he finds himself there, and he must make the best of it. Whether I join him or don't join him someday, but I don't see myself doing this a hell of a lot longer. I do like to enjoy life a little, and I certainly don't want to be a geezer on a walker and a stick in my stable. I still want to, travel the world a bit and enjoy myself.
Well, hopefully you can come down and enjoy one of Robbie and Matt's victories here. So finally to wrap up, Matt, if you had to choose a country outside of Australia and South Africa, out of the ones that you've been to train in, which one did you enjoy the most?
I really enjoyed America. I felt like they had a similar view on the horses there. They really looked up to the horses and made them the superstars of the industry. and I enjoy the dirt racing. It's exciting, it's fast. So it probably would be America.
Yeah, and Mike, same question. Outside of Australia and South Africa.
I've been lucky enough to train quite a bit in England, which I enjoyed. But it's quite. There's just so many tracks in England, and it's so spread out. I like the American system where you sit at one track for 32 days and you race there. Plus, you've got the variety of dirt and turf. We used to have dirt here and then we stopped it for some reason. I like that variety because there are those morning glories that just like to do it on the dirt and don't do it on the turf. So that's why I enjoy American racing. I like the variety.
Yep. And Matt, was there any question that stood out to you as being the one that we should have as the winning question?
There were some really good questions, but I'm going to go with the non-racing one, the rugby one.
Rugby one? All right, let's see who answered, who asked that one. It was the spring, William Setterino. So William, if you could send me an email. So it's, you should have the email from the webinar. If you shoot me one, I'll also have your details and I'll get in touch with you. Congratulations on winning that prize. So the Griffith Racing gear, which soon will be Griffith deKock Racing gear. So whole new line of clothing coming, Matt, I see. Lots of designs happening. But thanks to both of you. Obviously, Matt, being local and you've been out at Ballarat training all day and then to come on, which, is fairly late for trainers' hours, and Mike tuning in from South Africa. I appreciate both of your time, and I'm sure the guests have appreciated it as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.
Thanks very much, Corey.
Thanks, guys, and we'll see you all next week.